Hi everyone, many thanks for joining this latest Managed Service webinar. I'm Warren Butler, Marketing Director here at Preact, and today I'm joined by my colleague David Clode. In this session, we'll be focusing on how to manage changes across Dynamics environments with the aim of reducing risks when making customizations and releasing new solutions. We'll share recommendations on how to make sure that sandbox instances stay in sync with your production environment, and David will be outlining a series of considerations before making a sandbox refresh. He'll then walk you through the process to perform a refresh in the Power Apps Admin Center and go on to cover three main environment scenarios for managing solution changes to Dynamics 365. As part of this, David will demonstrate how to use the Admin Center to package a solution with a new field that will be added to a form and system view, and then export this to a production environment. These examples will be based on a cloud deployment of Dynamics 365 Online, so several of the points we'll cover won't be applicable if your organization is using an on-premise version. However, we still hope you find this useful, especially if you are planning to make a cloud migration at some future point. Okay, let's get started. So over to you, David.
Many thanks, Warren. Hi everyone, my name's David and I work as one of the trainers here at Preact. And today's session, we're first of all going to look at doing a sandbox refresh. So just making sure that our sandbox site is up to date and mirrors what we've actually got in our live production site, and then looking at solution management. So if I've made some development work in my sandbox site, what is the best process of pushing that over to my live production site? Okay, so just before we start the live demo, just a couple of slides I just wanted to go through. So first of all, Sandbox Refresh, it now uses the Power Platform Admin Center. So for anyone on the call that may be familiar with actually doing a Sandbox Refresh, now it uses the Power Platform rather than the traditional web interface with the Dynamics 365 Admin Center. And so the URL to be able to access this particular area, I'll just put it on the slide here. So admin.powerplatform.microsoft.com/environments. In order to access this particular area though, you do need a minimum of the Office 365 security role, Dynamics 365 admin. So this is a separate role than traditional Dynamics 365 security roles. So whoever actually manages your Office 365 tenant for your users, they will actually need to provide that particular role to you. You won't be able to access this particular area and do some of the tasks such as being able to do a copy of your production site to Sandbox without this particular role. However, if you do need some assistance in actually being able to get that role applied, please let our support team know and they'll be happy to help. There are just some items just to consider before you actually begin to refresh your sandbox site. First of all, check with ourselves and any other system admins you may have at your organization if there are actually any unpublished development work or customizations that are currently sitting in sandbox but not in your production site. Because one of the key things when you do refresh your sandbox site, first of all, everything will get wiped, so whatever's in your sandbox site will be replaced with the data in your production site, but also all backups will be lost as well on your sandbox site. So really key, just make sure that any unpublished work is that you want to be able to keep is in your production site. So you won't be able to restore from a backup after the refresh has actually gone through. One other thing just to consider as well is your storage capacity. So we'll have a look at that in a moment in the live demo, but just check you've actually got sufficient storage capacity in your tenant. If I were to do a full copy from my production site to my sandbox site, that's going to mirror whatever I've been using in my production site for storage, will reflect that in my sandbox site as well. And also, really, this should only be required once. So after we look at the solution management side of things, and you're actually going through the correct procedure to push changes from sandbox to your live environment, you shouldn't really need to refresh sandbox again. The only real reason you probably ever need to do that is maybe just to keep the data up to date in your sandbox site. But apart from that, not really many reasons why you'd ever really need to go down this particular scenario again to refresh your sandbox site. Okay, so we're just going to switch over to my environment, so just bear with me just one moment.
Okay, there we go. So I'm now in my environment here. As you see, top left, I'm in the Power Platform Admin Center. And I've got my two environments. I've got my sandbox site, and I've got my live production site that all my users are currently in at the moment. And so, yeah, just want to be able to refresh sandbox, so everything that's in there currently mirrors what I've currently got in my live site. So as I say, first thing I probably really need to do is just check I've got sufficient capacity available to me to actually do a refresh. So I'm going to select Analytics on the left here, and then go into Capacity. So that's just loaded up here, and it's just a really nice way of being able to see how much storage you have actually available to you. So this graph at the bottom here, I can just sort of get an overview of how much storage in gigabytes each of my environments are using. So my production site, I can see sort of nearly 2.7 gigabytes that's using overall, and my sandbox is just slightly less than that. So if I were to do a full refresh, that storage that I've got that I'm going to be using for my sandbox site is pretty much going to be the exact same level as my production site. And I can just see overall at the top here, I've got more than sufficient storage space available to me to actually do this. If sort of maybe going over your storage capacity when you actually do a full refresh, you can delete some of the data that sort of gets copied over into your sandbox site. So some of the things like completed system jobs, audit logs that you may not really be beneficial to use in the sandbox site, they can always be deleted after the full refresh has actually gone through. Okay, so I'm going to switch over to environments on the left here. And so what I need to select is the environment that I'm going to be copying from. So I'm going to be copying from my production to my sandbox. So I'm going to select production. And as soon as I select the production site, I then have these extra options available to me at the top here. So I'm going to select copy. And I then get this pop-out window on the right here. And so first of all, it's just warning me that any existing backups that are associated with my sandbox site will get deleted. So as soon as I've completed this copy, those backups on my sandbox site will be gone. So just something to be aware of. And then I've got the copy over option. So I've got two options here for me. I've got everything, which is going to be a full copy. That's going to copy over everything which I've got in my live site, including all of my data. Or I've got customizations and schema only. So this will be all of your entities, all of your forms, your fields that you're familiar with, just no records. You probably only really use that particular option if you're very short of storage, but it probably would rely on you to actually either install some sample data or import some spreadsheets of some contacts and accounts, so you've got some records to play about with. But I'm going to use the everything option, and I just then need to select which environment I'm actually going to copy this to. I've only got my sandbox site. Obviously, if I had multiple sandbox sites, you can select those from here. Obviously, because I've just got the one, I'm just going to select that. You can use the security groups option. It's not something I'm going to be covering today, but I'm just going to leave that as it is. And select copy. It's just warning me again. Everything is going to be completely deleted in my sandbox site. So all of my backups, any data which may be in that sandbox site will go. So again, just warning me, but I'm happy to go ahead. So click on confirm. Which then redirects me to this page here. So it's going to go through these 4 stages. So just validating, preparing, actually processing the copy over to my sandbox site, and then just finalising, just checking everything's all okay. For timings, really depends on the size of the database, how long this process actually takes, and also sort of like the size of your the actual load on the servers as well. So I'm just going to leave that to run in the background for a moment. I've just got one more slide just to go over, just with some points just to be aware of after the copy is actually completed. Okay, so just while that's running in the background, just some items to consider when the sandbox refresh has actually completed. So it's just at a high level, really. First off, probably recommend just disable the Dynamics 365 mailboxes. It really just prevents emails that you may be using for training or testing purposes from actually being delivered to customers. So go into the mailboxes area, select your mailboxes, and just deactivate those. If you're using the SharePoint integration on your live site, also maybe just consider deactivating that, or potentially setting up a non-production environment within SharePoint and linking the two if that was something you perhaps wanted to look at testing in your sandbox environment. And also mentioned just a bit earlier on with regards to the storage capacity, probably look at just doing a bulk delete job, especially on things like system jobs, your email attachments, so from the tracked emails in your live site, audit logs, so any activities as well, just to reduce space. Probably really just look at that if doing a full refresh is really going to push you over your storage capacity. But contact us, if you sort of need any assistance in sort of going through any of these particular items. Okay, so if I now just switch back to my site. Okay, so that's actually completed during that particular time. Again, the database is quite small, which I've got here. But one thing just to be aware of, when the sandbox site gets refreshed, it does put this into administration mode. So administration mode for your sandbox site basically means only people that have a system administrator or system customizer security role will be able to access Sandbox. So that gets enabled by default when a refresh has actually gone through. To turn this off, I can just click on the hyperlink here to go into the settings area, or at the top here, I can see administration mode is enabled. I'll just disable that. Click on save. And that's now complete. So I've now got my Sandbox site fully up to date with what I've actually got in my production site as well. Okay, so now that's complete, we'll probably now sort of look at the solution management side. So this will really assist you in migrating over your changes which you've made in your Sandbox site over to your production site. I've come across quite a few scenarios before where customers have either made their changes just straight into the production site, or alternatively they've made changes in their Sandbox site, tested them, happy with the changes they've made, and then are actually recreating those from scratch in their production site. But using solution management, you don't need to do any of that. So ideally what you would do, you would be making all of these customizations in your Sandbox site. So I can do things like sort of creating new fields, customizing the forms, creating workflows, enabling security roles, and even sort of creating brand new entities. And I can package those up into a solution and then migrate that over and import that into my production site. So once it's been thoroughly tested, it's obviously this sort of then limits the risk of potentially any issues or any downtime if I'm making changes straight in my production site. Okay, so the two types of solution, managed and unmanaged. Managed solutions are the recommended type of solution for if you import in straight into your production site. They can easily be uninstalled and rolled back to the previous version, and the components that are part of that solution cannot be directly modified when they're imported into that instance. With an unmanaged solution, it's really only recommended to export and then import a managed solution if it's going into another Sandbox site that you may have. It can't be uninstalled, so if I were to delete the solution from my whatever site I've actually imported that into, it keeps all the components in there, so completely opposite to what a managed solution would do. And they can, the items that are part of that solution can be directly modified as well. So it sort of limits the ability to really sort of do some version controlling if you're just using unmanaged solutions. Okay, now just a slide here, really just to sort of cover some of the typical sort of environment scenarios that you may have. May have some people on the call that really just at the moment just use the production environment. So all of your customizations, all of your changes that you've been tasked to do within Dynamics are just in your production site. Not the scenario we recommend at all. You have potentially a sandbox development environment, so where you'd be doing all of your changes and also the production environment as well. This tends to be the most popular one at the moment. So you'd have the sandbox and production environments, but you also could potentially have a second sandbox environment. So you could have a development environment, so where you're doing all of your changes, you build in them all, and then you push them into another sandbox site, which you could sort of have as a test environment. So that will give the ability to actually get your users to actually test what you're building, making sure that it all works okay with your current system. If it does, great, you can then push it over to your production site. Okay, so I'm just going to switch over to my demo site again now, and we'll just go through the scenario of creating a new field in the sandbox site and just pushing it over to a production site via a managed solution. Okay, and so now in the new Power Apps area for managing solutions, if you do go to the solutions area within Dynamics 365, it will prompt you if you want to try the new Power Apps area. So this is the new environment. On the top right here, just double check which instance you're currently working in. So I want to create my changes in my sandbox site to move them over to production. So I'm in the right one. And I want to create a brand new solution. So I'm going to click on New. Give the solution a name. I'm just going to call this 365 Changes. Select a publisher. So publisher really just gives you an idea of who's actually created that solution. And every organisation will have a default publisher. You can use default publisher. The only thing is, when you create components for that, sort of within that solution, it will have a prefix of new underscore. Now I've created our own publisher here, so if I select Preact, I'm just going to click on Edit Publisher just so you get an idea of what you can sort of select here if you do create a new publisher. So I've just put in the name, the prefix, I've just put PRE underscore, and just get a bit of a preview. And also it's just given me an option to set value prefix. So if I then sort of create option sets as part of this, the numerical value that are part of those options will have that particular prefix. And then finally the version. So I've got this as 1.0.0.0. It's not something I was going to be covering in this particular session. We are planning on doing a future webinar on versioning of solutions, but this will allow you, rather than having to create a brand new solution each time, you can actually reuse the one that you've got, but then increase the version based on what changes you've got as part of that solution. But I'm going to leave that as it is and click on Create. There we go, open it up. And so currently I don't have any components as part of this particular solution. It's just a blank area where I can now sort of start to either create or add existing components in. So if I click on New, I can do things like I can create brand new apps, brand new entities, new flows, new reports. Or under Add Existing, these are all of perhaps existing components that may be part of your sandbox site that you perhaps want to sort of just add in there. Now what I want to do, I just want to create a brand new field, add it to my main form on the account entity, package it up into solution, and export that to production. So I know the account entity already exists, so under Add Existing I'm going to select Entity. Select Account, click on Next, and then this is where I can start to perhaps select some different components as part of that entity which I've got. So components being perhaps existing fields, existing forms, views. So I know that the form already exists against the account entity, so that is the only thing I want to add in here. So if I select Components, I have all of these tabs along the top here. Now I'm going to select Forms just for now. I'm going to select the main account form, and I'll probably just add the active accounts view as well. So I'll just select Views, select Active Accounts, and click on Add. So now there's my account entity. And if I open it up, I don't see any fields. All I'll see are the one view which I've created, and also the form as well, which I've added in here as well. So to create my new field, I select fields on the left here, click on add field, and I just need to give it a name. So I'm going to call this one previous account name. Notice the prefix here, got the PRE underscore, and I can sort of select the data type if I want that to be optional, recommended or required. But I'm just going to leave the defaults as they are, click on done, and that's now created that brand new field as part of my Dynamics 365 changes solution. And maybe I just want to add that field to the view and the form which I've got as part of here. So first of all, if I select views, and I'll just open up my active accounts view. Oh, sorry, I forgot to save. Open up my view. Find the field on the left here. There we go. Previous account name. Click drag, and based on where I want that column to be, just release my mouse. I can now see that's now added that in there. So if I just save that, click on back, and I'm just going to go to the form and just add that field in there as well. And then my solution will be ready to go to put it into my production environment. So select forms, open up the main account form, just scroll down on the left here. There's my field, and I'm just going to drag it on here. So the form designer on the new power-ups, really easy to use. You actually get a visual representation of how that form is actually going to look when it's live for your users. So click on save. I'm just going to publish as well, just so it's got the latest version of the component within the solution. Click on back. And so my solution is now ready to be exported from Sandbox and imported into my live site. So if I select the solution, click on export, it's prompting me, okay, do I want to publish all my changes? I've already just done that in my previous window there, so I don't need to. If I had multiple entities in here, I may just want to publish all changes, but I've sort of already done that. And you also get the ability to check for any issues that may be part of this solution. This is probably only really needed for if you've got some plugins, custom workflow activities, or any web resources as a part of your solution. I've not got any of those, so I'm just going to leave that now and just click on next. And it's asking me, okay, well, what version number do I want to give this? So it's just added a 1 at the end here, so I'm going to leave that as it is. And exporting as. So from our slides earlier, because this is going into my live site, I want this to be a managed solution. It's even saying on the end here that that's the recommended way to go through if it's going into a production site. So I'm going to click on export. Can sometimes take just a few seconds. Okay, so it's just prompting me, okay, well, where do I actually want to save this solution? So I'm just going to save this solution, click on OK. Okay, so that's now saved to my desktop. If I now switch my environment now to production, so I'm now working in my production site. If I go to solutions on the left here, so I can see sort of previous solutions I've got in here, but now I want to actually import. So I've got my solution, click on import, browse to the file. There it is. Click on next, and that's now going to go through and import the solution. So select import. So it's now just going through to import the changes. Just depends how many components you've actually got in that solution that will determine how long it actually takes. It's now just gone through. You can see it's actually been imported successfully. So I'm going to click on close. I'm just going to publish all of my customizations. Because they're changes, obviously, I need to publish the changes so they're available for everyone to be able to see. Okay, that's been now successfully published. So if I now switch to my live site, there we go. If I go to accounts, I can see that previous account name column is now in my active accounts view as we did before. If I just open one of these up, there's my field which we just created as well. So all packaged within one solution to push those changes over from my sandbox site to my live site. Okay, so just quickly, I just wanted to go over some of the different scenarios you may have for making Dynamics 365 changes. So firstly, if you're just making changes in your production site, so yeah, you're going to have instant visibility of the changes and updates, and also there's no real need to sort of implement a release process. So your production site is always going to be kept up to date. However, there's sort of added risk on that where obviously you're making all of these changes in your production site, so there's no real separate environment for making, sort of doing any testing or any of that development work. And also you're not going to have the ability to easily roll back any of the changes that you may have made. Next scenario that we've got, probably one of the most popular ones, is you've got your production site and also your sandbox / development site. So if I'm making all of these changes in sandbox, pushing them over into production site like what we just did earlier was a managed solution. So the releases are going to be locked down. They're going to be easily rolled back if needed. And you've also got the sandbox site to actually be doing your development and sort of all your testing in there as well. Only drawback with that is your internal QA and your UAT are all going to be done in the sandbox environment. So there's no way to sort of thoroughly test some of the changes that you've made before it goes into production. Also as well, what we do tend to recommend, especially if you're going to be using the increment in versions of managed solutions, is just try and keep those in an area so you've got almost like a catalogue of these changes that you've made. So somewhere like Dropbox or OneDrive, just to keep those somewhere, so just in case you ever did need to roll back to a much earlier version. And then finally, this scenario here, which is one which we do recommend, is you have your sandbox site where obviously you're making all of the changes. You then have another sandbox site, which would be like your equivalent of a UAT site, where you'd have the solution imported as a managed solution into UAT, where users will sort of do all of their testing. You've got a separate environment, which is almost going to be like a mirror copy of what you've got in production. And you're going to address all of the issues that may come up as part of those changes that you've made in your UAT site and in your dev site before it's pushed into production. So all the issues are addressed before it reaches all of your users. But again, just potentially look at having a catalogue of your managed solution versions if you do look at sort of incrementing the version numbers going forward. Okay, so that's all from me. I'm going to pass you back to Warren, and he'll open the floor for any questions that you may have.
Many thanks, David. We hope you found this a useful overview and it has perhaps helped you identify some improvements in how you manage and publish changes in Dynamics. As David mentioned, we are planning further webinars, so please do let us know what topics you'd like us to cover. When you leave this session, you'll see a survey pop up where you can share your feedback and make suggestions. In recent months, we've presented exclusive webinars for our managed service clients covering the unified interface and Power BI. If you missed either of these sessions, we'll include a link in our email when we share today's recording. We're going to pause for just a moment to take a look at the questions which have come through, so if you just bear with us.